They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking,
hi, this is Nico. You're listening to my dad Rafal, also known as the White Rabbit, and James Jardine on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Buckle up and enjoy.
deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were
Alrighty. With that intro, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is Raph. On the far right there is James. Welcome
How's
back.
it going today, Raph?
Cold. It's freaking cold. So I've got my mug of coffee here, my Buc-ee's mug of coffee. Did not come back from the nearest Buc-ee's is 47 miles away, but it's my Buc-ee's. And Joel knows a little bit about Buc-ee's. But man, they came to Georgia here with a vengeance, and now it's a must stop every time. Anyway, today's episode is going to be awesome. I have a returning guest, and we're going to talk a little about the state of things. Welcoming back to the show, Mr. Joel Scambray. How are you, buddy? Unmute yourself.
Hey, Rolf, James, great to be here. Yeah, am I coming through?
Yeah, you sound great.
There we go. Audio test passed. Yeah, I feel like saying long-time listener, first-time caller, but you're right. I think I've been on the show before, but I listen to the podcast every week at least. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Do you listen to ones that are you going to listen to this one? Listen to yourself?
That's the TBD. I'll probably listen to the first 5 minutes, and depending on how dumb I sound, I may shut it off. But
this is the thing. Like, I like doing this, but I hate the sound of. I always think I sound weird, so I don't like listening to my own voice. So I don't know. Well, anyway, I listen to the show every once in a while because I have to edit it, so I'll listen for that. But I try to do minimal editing. But all right, we are recording this as the Arctic polar vortex is just loosening its death grip on you, but it's definitely coming for us. Folks were chatting before the show. So today is January 18th when we're recording this, but it is going to be 35 tonight, so not bad, and then 12 tomorrow night. 12.
Ouch.
That is officially effing cold, y'all. Yeah, James is in a hoodie. Well, James is always in a hoodie, though.
I'm always in the hoodie. Yeah. That's fine. What did I say? It's 61 outside. I've got the heater on under my desk, and I've got my hoodie on. So it's
weirdo. 61 is t-shirt and shorts weather. I don't know what you're talking about. It is so chilly here that my cat is actually decided that she wants to sit on my lap all day today because I've got a big warm sweater on, and I'm apparently warmer than her. She's taking over my my big my giant what do you call those the love sacks, I can't think of the name of it.
I don't know.
Oh, I know what you mean. The beanbag chair.
Beanbag chair. Wow.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There's a name for that,
not
right?
working.
Yeah. Did you call it a love sack? Is that what you said? Like
yeah.
Maybe
that's the company that makes them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, easy there, killer. This is a family show. I don't know what you're mute.
That's
James.
what I thought too.
Inappropriate reference count 1.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the show. Good Lord. All right, Joel. Tell us a little bit about, professionally speaking, what you're up to now.
Yeah, I remain at NCC Group, which is all things cybersecurity services firm. I am in the technical assurance services part of the business, which is some people might call it a fancy name for pen testing. We'll talk about that. I like technical assurance a little better as I get older, but I run a fairly large organization, over 100 technical engineers that do pen testing, assurance, reviews of all the things we like to say, cloud, devices, web apps. It amazes me how much human expert driven web app assessment that we still do, right? Despite the headlines, automation. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's still my day job almost 25 years later. Going back to the early days has been fairly similar.
Back in my day, I think we about dropped into this field at roughly the same time, because we have similar. We talked about this at one point, but hey, listen, I wanted to ask you to kind of kick this off. State of the economy, because the economy on cyber, I think largely in enterprise, goes in pendulum swings, right? We go, people buy a lot of products, then they buy a lot of services, then they buy a lot of products, then they buy a lot of services, and back and forth we go. I suspect, and this is kind of a longer trend though that I've been seeing. Maybe you can validate this, because probably you're in a better seat than I am to do that. But over the last decade, we've slowly ramped up on how much companies shift into either managed or outsourced security services. I suspect some of that is due to the fact that there's just, there's a challenge putting people in the right seats. I'm not sure I believe in this giant, millions and millions of talent gap kind of worker shortage thing. But it's certainly difficult putting people, especially down market, right, where you can't pay the, the big Fortune 500 firms pay. Are we shifting permanently, do you think, into a more services-driven world?
I think, listening to your comments, it's like we're asymptotically getting, like you said, it swings back and forth, but within a, approaching an endpoint, right? And there is more automation. There is different uses of human expertise. Unquestionably, 2023 had some very impactful layoffs. Let's say it. The big tech firms for sure. Obviously opinions vary on sort of the meaning of that. But my own sense is that it's not unrelated to that pendulum swing, right? We're going to talk about AI here. I'd be fairly certain I could lay some bets on that. And that's the latest. I shouldn't say. I actually think it's different, but let's call it the latest flavor of the month of that swing, right? Okay, we're moving back towards human or tool amplified human stuff. And there's always no secret to both of you, right? The outsourcing thing, security always had that tinge of like legal or other professions, finance, where, oh yes, we have outside counsel, we have an audit every year if we're a public company, or more than that, right, to have that independent view. So that also, I think, is within that swing, or maybe outside of it, pushing constantly towards a general lean, right?
So I've seen, I think the pendulum swing, when I started in, it was, you could almost time it, right? And it would go in roughly 3-year cycles. I think the swing on the product side is getting shorter, and the swing and the area that we call services is getting longer. I don't know if it's because the product world moves and evolves so fast that by the time a company buys, so there's this crazy notion that people get that they're going to buy something and tomorrow it'll be useful to them. It's never been that way. I think the realization is services, whether the vendor does it or some third party does it, is almost always required, especially the more as our products get more complex, right? We're not just installing antivirus anymore with like 10 configuration options. This is complex stuff. So the gap between I bought it today and I'm able to actually extract peak value out of it is usually, unfortunately, at least half the license, initial license period, is what I've kind of seen, right? And so you bring in your consultants and stuff to try to shorten that time to value, and and what I've seen is organizations that do that regularly start to think, why am I trying this at all by myself? Like, why am I at all trying to operate this? Why don't I just buy this as a service?
MSSP, right? Yeah.
But I think the other side of that, Raf, too, like you've got the ramp up side to you start extracting value from it, but then how often do you see a tool fall off after so long, right? You've got it working, but there's no policies or procedures in place in house that, okay, we did it. Static analysis is a great example of that, right? Like people bring it in house. They say, oh, we're going to do this. They scan some stuff. They get 100,000 vulnerabilities. And then you go ask 6 months later and you're like, hey, how's that going? Like,
200,000.
I haven't looked at that in 6 months. Like, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we don't need this tool anymore. And they get rid of it. You know, like I think that's overlooked too often, is that backside of that losing the value because nobody's there to maintain it. There's no procedures in place for that.
I super align with that, James. Yeah, I mean, I see that at least as often as I see, you know, hey, we're really getting value out of this. The static analysis is a classic one. I was almost going to be cynical and respond to Raf's initial question with you know, we got this tool to solve this problem, and then a year later we discovered we had a totally different problem. Right? It helped us get to
regularly too.
Oh, it's not that's the problem, right?
Yeah. Look, I think that's part of. I think it's those forces where you've got whether it's the internals of the company change, or the risk changes, or whatever that calculus or the formula changes, the technology moves quickly, and then this difficulty that the industry keeps struggling with putting the right employee in the right seat at the right time.
Right time.
Because I think those folks, and I'm just going to just on a tangent for just a second, because I'm going to bring myself right back. But those folks that talk about this massive gap in how we need tens of millions of analysts and all this stuff, I think they're trying to solve the problem of insecurity by having humans at the keyboard everywhere, and scaling by humans does not work, period, end of thought. So we swing back into technology, like, okay, well then let's solve it with tech and some combination of people, and we like the tech cycles quickly, the problem in the company cycles quickly, and then the human part just never quite fits right. And so you've got this, like, it's like having, you know, four bolts out of 6 on your wheel, you know, and one of them is loose. And so you're like, yeah, I can drive on this, but I can't go very fast because I risk losing the wheel and cratering the car. And I feel like that's where security's been stuck the last 20 years, man.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of truth, and maybe that's inherent to the profession, right? Again, it's risk management, you know, to use one view of it, and you're never 100%, as the cliche goes, but again, you're trying to approach it with controls, and then again, you know, the threat landscape changes, the tech changes, the thing changes, and you know, you push that measurement down a little bit, and you either have to reinvest to move it up, or decide that you know, that risk is no longer, you know, interesting, you insure whatever, right? Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, has it always been, you know, troubling times for humans? I'm remembering my Dickens, right? It's the best of times, the worst of times. It's,
that's right.
You know,
that's right.
You know, I think we're always struggling to find our place. There's, you know, cliches aside, you know, again, I think we have, you know, with artificial intelligence is the latest example. You know, a truly interesting thing. We're trying to create something that learns and interacts with humans and improves on them. You know, which to your point about scale, I mean, that's always been the dream, right? Is a technology empowered human expert does scale in, you know, theory. That's the nirvana we're all striving for, and achieving it at various levels. I'll throw one other example, and we'll keep going. But you know, one thing, you know, that I see increasingly is you know, EDR, XDR. That's sort of the buzzwords are expounding now, but you know, there's a lot of, you know, I saw one customer the other day with, you know, some absurd number of events in the top of their funnel, right? You know, 5 million raw events, and then it gets filtered down mostly by, automation. There's AI in there now, right? And you get down to, like 30 events that get to the human experts, right? And so we're improving, I think. And we also, I'll plug the, what are the other drivers here? Regulation, third party
Yeah.
assurance, right? That's also is EDR table stakes now. I'll pause. Yeah, lots of thoughts there.
Yeah. Listen, so when it comes to services in your world, what's the I don't know, what's the standouts right now? Where is the biggest need? Like what are you totally backlogged on as an organization? Like, where's the big ask?
I think it's a good question. I mean, my perspective, which certainly is a small, tiny, infinitesimal part of the overall, what are we at now? The trillions of dollars, the cybersecurity market. The fundamentals don't go away. That's one of my favorite sort of punchlines. We talked about technical assurance, right? At some level, across the many years I've been in this business, that's still the thing, right? People are looking for assurance that what they're doing has been looked at and is as safe as it can be for their customers, their purposes, whatever. Traditionally, that has meant, use a code word here, a pen test, right? Let's attack the thing like the attackers do, right? And that'll give us our best view of how it would survive against attackers, right? So that I mean, I still see a great deal of that predominantly, still a lot of human expert driven, and it's the same pyramid that you might expect, inverted pyramid, right? Web app dominates. Yeah, there's changes within that. A lot more web API, right? And there's a sort of a plethora of technologies there. One could argue it's less web now and more app, right? Other stuff, and mobile, infrastructure's been making a bit of a comeback. I was a network pen tester, way back in the day, and I thought, oh boy, the app is going to it's all going to become app layer, and that's where the organizations want to focus there. Where's my risk question? But that, cloud is sort of help with that, right? We do a lot of, cloud configuration assessments on the big platforms, and then that, there's a whole plethora again of, all the things, right? Devices, particularly consumer devices, right? I mean, there's a lot of pressure to, how safe is this when I give it to tens of millions of people to use in their home and listen to their voice and do stuff, right?
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, and then it gets exotic, as you know, right? I've spent some time recently with blockchain. That's obviously been hyped up and down. You might say, certainly, but there's some interesting stuff there, right? I mean, is the distributed, tracker of the things, right? There's some compelling, concepts there. Draws on crypto and other sort of primitives. And then, of course, AI as a target itself, right? What is AI? It's a model, which is a sort of indistinct thing to my little brain. And you've got people interacting with it. The whole data confidentiality and privacy model, I think, needs to be reconsidered for that. I'll pause again. You get me going.
Is there any distinction? Are you able to see, due to a vast number of clients and stuff like that, the difference between compliance checkbox driven need for these services versus organizations that are, looking without that? Like maybe they have the compliance need, but we're coming because we actually want that assurance. We want that check, not because PCI told me I had to have that check. Like, is there a swing in that stance where people are just coming because this is part of our program versus, hey, we have to check the box and we don't really do anything with it, but great, we did it.
You put your finger on the pulse. My personal observation is third-party assurance. I think there's a diversity of reasons people do this. So not to say it's all, but certainly I would say, anecdotally to me, a large portion of it is that third-party assurance, right? My customer requires me to do this to show that my service or product for them is, secure, right? Or, they're the vendor to the big, Acme Corp, right? Big enterprise, and they have to do that annually. I'm actually part of a little plug here, the App Defense Alliance, which has just formally moved out into its own actual organization within the Linux Foundation. It is hosted by Microsoft and Meta and Google, and they are really trying to drive that. Those three players manage some of the largest app developer ecosystems in the world, right? Think about Gmail, think about Office 365, cloud, who's hosted there, and the ADA is really trying to codify. What does it mean to have a license to operate securely as a web app in our ecosystem, and trying to make that interchangeable, right? So, we got certified on M365, and how much of that applies to working in Google's workspaces. Is that right? I always forget the workplaces workspace. Apologies if I missed a brand there. So yeah, I think, James, sorry, back to your question. I think that's increasingly what I see is the big driver. I have to do this because some business value proposition or organizational value proposition is driving me to do it. I think, second is what you said, kind of, is we like to joke, for the right reasons, hey, we want to have assurance for our whoever's using this thing, customers, etc. Regulatory, certainly a pressure. PCI, would you call that a version of third-party assurance? That, a consortium-driven, I'm a participant in this industry, therefore I have to do this annually. Maybe the regulatory thing is always sort of troubling to me, because that, back to swings, that sort of comes and goes, right? I think the SEC thing is the latest flavor of the month, and we'll see.
I was thinking that, like, the regulatory side too, not just the PCI stuff, but when you mentioned like devices, like client stuff that we're assuring, right? Because with IoT stuff and all that, there's a lot of stuff being pushed down, governmentally, about this is what you have to be doing, and you have to follow these certain steps, which obviously, if you're in that space, should be pushing a lot of it. Whether you care to do it or not, you kind of have to do it, right?
Yes, and I still see also more third-party assurance, right? I was part of the IOXT Alliance for a while, which is an alliance of sort of IoT, vendors to get involved. Have a couple of colleagues that really went for a sort of third-party IoT device certification, right? That down to the concept of a QR code on the box, right? Oh, here's your your Wi-Fi router, and scan this for the security certification or information, right? And and so there's a couple of companies still working on that. There's also the industry standards bodies, cellular standards that are kind of coming from the ground up on, oh, we've got the baseband, and boy, we should also look at the mobile OS there too, right? I'm less familiar with that, but I think that's another version of this sort of, I guess, to qualify when I say third-party assurance, I don't mean that narrowly. I mean that, there's sort of private enterprises pushing for good reasons, and it's incentivized, right?
So, two questions. We'll take this as a two-parter. So I'm going to look at the either end of the extreme. Are you guys still seeing, from a assurance and pen testing and review and all that stuff, some of that old goodness, some of those old systems, right? Some of the old flavors of Unix, some of the COBOL stuff, some of the mainframe. Well, mainframe's not old, but it's certainly dated. Are you guys still seeing older tech out there?
Yes. In fact, we had a discussion of mainframes. I don't know, System 390. I forget the flavor, but somebody wanted a review. A bit big. I'll name the industry. Hopefully, very big retailer, global. That mainframes are behind it, for regional, whatever they're doing, right? Occasionally we do actually get COBOL. I have a colleague that was a COBOL programmer, and, he occasionally, he's like, hey, the only person we have that, knows that, and, he gets tagged with the project, or at least to talk to the customer. Yeah. I mean, so I think it is getting rarer, less frequent, but it's not going away. I think to the sort of more general concept of legacy, certainly not a solved problem. There's a lot of tech debt, I think, is the more modern and perhaps better phrase, right? Is there's that balance of stability and consistency that stops you from patching, right? And 5 years later, you look back and go, "Ooh, we've got a real issue here. Our pen testers are no longer excited to do this project."
It adds an interesting dynamic to it as well, because if you take COBOL as an example, right? There's not a lot of info about COBOL security like you'd think. If it was like .NET or Java, there's so many articles that talk about it. There's so many people that research into it. They know the ins and out. You say, hey, we got COBOL, I want somebody to review it for security. Like, what are they basing that off of to be able to say, like, yeah, we did a thorough search? Like, there's no info. So unless they've done the research themselves, it kind of reminds me of like Charlie Miller doing a lot of the automobile stuff. Like, people wouldn't know what to look for if we didn't have somebody that went out and actually did all that research to say, here's what to look for. So it makes it a lot more difficult when you talk about legacy systems. Like, where do you find the people that have that knowledge? Because especially in a situation where there's not a lot of knowledge out there, like I could go, if you said, hey, I need you to go do a security review of Rails, right? Like I can go find, like Rails has a ton of stuff about their security, like we could look that stuff up. But how do you handle dealing with that at those situations where there is really nothing? Like we could do it, but we don't know anything.
Yeah, and pre-internet documentation, heyday, right? Yeah, agreed. And then it's very narrow. Again, the mainframe response of let's say roughly 500 consultants, 2. That's so it's not, and there's a little bit of a mix, right? I mean, I think we're one of those organizations that's put some investment into maintaining those, because we do occasionally get called on it. So we have methodologies in certain states of maintenance, right? I'm not saying they're totally up to date. You say a great word there, which is research. That has been the huge driver of much of cybersecurity. And you make a great example, Charlie Miller, right? We think all of the things, but that does tend to be the more cutting edge. We still that's still a very active pursuit amongst our consultants, right? That's still a big a focus of passion and excitement about sort of breaking the new things, and it does create that sort of abandonment of the old things, right? And to date, I'm still amazed. It seems like we're still able to address the legacy needs. I haven't heard the kind of, this is completely gone, and if somebody asks us, we just tell them no. I haven't seen that yet. I should say a lot. I should never say never, right? But the day may be coming.
Yeah. Listen. So, what about the other spectrum of it? Because as we hear more about critical infrastructure and stuff like that, you're probably looking at doing pen testing or assurance work on equipment that is both probably very new in the industrial controls, the OT space. I'm thinking municipalities, cities, states kind of stuff, and also some stuff that's probably never had an eyeball on it and it's been running for 20 years. So it's kind of those extremes, like in a nice, neat little cobweb covered package. Are you running into much of that?
Less so. I mean, I think good news is, cybersecurity awareness is at an all-time high. That sounds sort of contrived to say that, but I encounter fewer and fewer people that are as in the situation you described, where we've never even considered looking at this. They may not have actually looked at it. They may have had a more of a compliance checkboxy thing, as James mentioned earlier. I want to come back to that because that's an interesting, maybe another interesting split, right? That the true pen test versus the compliance thing. But I don't find people that have not a clue that security is important. And it kind of varies, right? As you speak, I think of like oil and gas, right? Oil and natural gas, as they like to be called. I'm here in Texas, so I see a lot of that. Their view on OT security is more advanced, right? You certainly might find a tech startup in some other region of the world that has got a more of a unenlightened outlook on, let's just get that thing out there and see how people use it, right? And security will be bolted on later, right? So I guess I say that to say that, as always, there's sort of a spectrum of actual data out there, but generally, I'm just trying to think of examples. I can't think of any where people are not thinking about security. Now, that sample bias, right? People come to me for security, so they've already thought about it, right? Sure there are, and it's not to say that there isn't dereliction. I can think of a recent example, pretty big product vendor with active O days, in the wild that, we had like a 6-month conversation with them where I was kind of sitting in the back, watching the progression and going, that your hair is on fire, right? So anyways, I may have wandered there, but yeah, I mean, people are generally trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think I mean that's the part that I'm interested in, is where sort of as trends happen, where is the work being done versus where is it shifting in a particular technology, identity versus apps. A lot of API work probably now. Are we going back to fat clients? Is there like a where's the balance, and kind of what do you, if you had to pull out the Joel Scambray crystal ball and shake it a little bit, it's a magic 8-ball, what is it telling us? What are you kind of prognosticating for us here?
Yeah, I mean, prediction is hard, especially about the future. And certainly I will say I've been proven wrong a bunch of times. I mean, the safe answer is, as you've heard here already, right? Fundamentals, the progression of the current, I think people moving workloads to the cloud, right? That sort of DevOps, more distributed environment, which makes it difficult to answer, right? I think you both know that more than anything, I'll speak for myself, right? The sort of microservices and DevOps, modern, I don't even want to say product, service, platform, SaaS, what do you call it, right? The things that people build now kind of defy my ability to even understand them, right? Bookmark maybe a discussion about threat modeling, right? Should we always start with describe to me what the heck this is and what do you think is risky here? Because we're never going to get down to the source code level, and it might not even be relevant, right? It's more about the interaction between the components than, so it's, what does the future portend? Probably more of that, more messiness. I mean, I spoke to a customer yesterday that, again, well-known brand, they were still asking the inventory question, right? We have a new business unit that we are onboarding into our AppSec program, and we thought, no problem, we'll get them into all the tools and the feeds and we talked to one of them, one of the product managers or whatever, and they kind of went, yeah, it'd be really difficult to tie the people in the organizational structure to the products. Do you even call it products? It's at components. Of course, there's open source that's being used. Git repos, is that the appropriate measure of target here, right? It's a very confusing conversation, so maybe that's my prediction, right? More confusion and sort of more need to sort of, threat model the target space, right? What exactly is the unit of assurance here that we should consider? And it might be different than we, old cavemen like me think about, right? A web app. Oh yeah, that doesn't mean anything anymore, right?
Yeah. I think this is probably, James, you're probably more qualified than I am here, but I'll give my opinion anyway. That conversation, this specific conversation about what's the atomic unit of measurement when it comes to like what is this thing? That's been a long time coming, because back when I did AppSec and started in early 2000s, it wasn't like apps, I could say, okay, every time you update the app, and they're like, well, this is technically an app that's like a frame, and it's got subcomponents, and they're all individual apps. So what do you call this thing? I said an app. What about that thing? It's an applet. Yeah. And so all these, all of that is very, very, very.
It used to be a lot easier, Raph. I used to say that when I taught the SANS class with doing the .NET course versus the Java course. Like .NET is great. We had WinForms or Web Forms and MVC. Like that was it. Go to Java and you've got Spring, you've got Faces, you've got 6,000 things, right? And then of course .NET got NuGet and they screwed the whole thing up. But I mean, it was like that, right? Like it was like you deployed a unit that was your app. Now it's like, okay, I deploy 6,000 microservices. That is my app, that call out to 1,000 different things. So it is really difficult to define that. The one thing I wanted to ask, before we wrapped up, was more around, because we started this with the question about services and people reaching out for services. What do you see as far as people that are reaching out? What is the skill level that a lot of the organizations have internally? So like we use pen testing as the example, right? Like, hey, we want this app pen tested. How many organizations have that skill level in-house and just need that third-party verification, versus a lot of organizations now don't have that really at all, because some could say it's harder to find, right? Like we don't have it. That's why we partner with a third party to be able to say, hey, we do pen testing as an external service, but our internal people do X, Y, and Z. Like we want to outsource all that because we don't have that skill set, or we don't have the time to focus our skill sets there. We want to push it someplace else.
Yeah, great question, and unsurprising, the consultant says it depends. I think I see that increasingly, and again, sample bias here. I tend to deal with, I would say enterprise to me is the mid-tier, right? I'm talking about very big, just to pick on some names that I've thrown out here, no implication of a relationship, but Microsoft, Google, sort of tech titan sized organizations, they have in-house pen testing teams of tens of peoples in business units, right? And a significant investment. Moving into what I might call the enterprise, right? Not titans, but pretty big businesses. They have that. It's smaller. It's not as well rounded, right? You'll find, do you have somebody that specializes in that? Yeah, no, we need you to come in and do that part. And then, there's the, what would you call it? SMB is too
small,
trite of a firm, but there's the vast majority of businesses, organizations out there are not those other two. And they don't have much, and they're really doing the full outsource kind of. We need our annual assurance review from you to make sure we're doing the right thing, and it's much more of a pure outsource model. So quick answer there on the spectrum of, but I guess in large part, yes, the in-house pen test teams is increasing. There's also that consulting in-house tug of war that I see quite directly every day. We have great people that move in and out of that career path a lot in our business.
All right, well, that sounds like a logical place to let it go then. Thanks for joining us, Joel.
Hey, great to see both of you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah.
All right, folks, that's been it. Thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this one. The ecosystem and the world on the services side, someplace I hold near and dear to my heart, keeps changing. But I feel like this conversation we could have had with slightly different terminology 5 years ago and 5 years before that. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. We'll see where this is. We'll check back in with Joel in a couple. We'll see what happens. But thanks for listening. Go check out our YouTube page. Lots of streaming video there. It's where this one gets streamed. And if you want to catch some of these live, you're more than welcome to. Catch us on LinkedIn. It's where I post all of our shows for the most part. And of course, if you're still on Twitter/X, there as well. So for the podcast, we'll catch you guys another time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Cue that music.